or something's going to happen. It's spinning, spinning, spinning.
Oh, do you have a link I
Never
can
done
put
that
on
before.
my Facebook page so it can go live on my page?
Yes, I thought I shared that with you already. I emailed it to you but the StreamYard itself.
Okay.
But I can probably do that from here. I don't know why we're not going live though. Never takes that. Oh, now it stopped. All right, let me try it again. Oh, now we're live, and just bear with us as you join in for real life talk. I'm going to see if I can't share a link with our guest today, who is Magick, Bernstein, and that way he can post it on his Facebook. Where?
While he's doing that, welcome everyone.
Why don't you introduce yourself? Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Greg
Where
Magick.
are you?
I am in Maui, as is Timothy, although we're in different locations. And I lead retreats here in Maui and other parts of Hawaii and Mount Shasta and Sedona. My work is a combination of years of coaching from some state-of-the-art, but more in the traditional end coaching practices that came out of the human potential movement in the 60s, combined with the skills that I acquired from working with shaman and kahuna over the last 25 years to be able to actually transmit whatever the person needs, so that when we're working together, the energy of what's needed penetrates into their being and evokes whatever is still in separation and is in needing of love and light, so that it can heal and resolve and return to unity.
Beautiful. I am sending you through Messenger StreamYard browser link.
Are you sending it through the StreamYard chat or through
No,
Facebook?
I can, but I sent it to your Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, that's cool. I got it there.
Yeah, and that way you should be able to share it more easily, I think.
Yeah.
My name's Timothy Earle. I am also on the island of Maui, and I will be scrolling my and Magick's contact information, our websites, where you can find our email addresses across the bottom. I too am a transformational coach. I work with medicinal substances as well as others, guiding people on journeys. And I work with individuals, couples, and I also lead group experiences here on the island as well as off the island. So if you have any need to find out more about that, contact me. Magick, do you do any kind of a inquiry call for free? Like if people are serious about working with you, can they email you, text you, and set up a time, or do you not do that?
I do. I do a free discovery session. It's a 30-minute session in which you can get a little flavor and a taste of my work, find out whether it's right for you and whether we each have a resonance with each other. And I do that with regard to anything I do. I do custom retreats. You can come out to Maui and spend 3 days or a week or a day with me, or I do structured retreats with the public for a week-long deep dives. I do one-on-one sessions on the phone. So we can find out what's right for you, and you can find out a little bit more about my work. And just to qualify, my work does not involve medicine. So I like to help people to have experiences that they might otherwise only have when they're using a substance on their own. So not that there's anything wrong with substances, it's just different approaches.
And I'm a blend. I do both.
Mm-hmm.
And I also do inquiry calls like Magick. So please, as our stuff's going by, if one of us resonates with you, then, and you're serious about actually doing some expansive work, transformational work, lots of different ways to name it, we'd be glad to speak with you and see if what we provide is a good fit for what you're looking for. I think today's topic is going to be quite interesting. It dovetails into, I think, both Magick and I's approach, which is, let me say this first. I know in my life at times I have fallen under a delusion of sorts. And the delusion goes like this: I've done my work. I know what I need to know. My life is good the way it is. It's a dangerous place, I think, for myself anyway, to get to where I'm at a place where I'm not actually inquiring anymore. I'm not actually deepening and expanding my ability to be in present. Um, Sounds simple, and yet the more I know about it, the more I seek out others to assist me in expanding my presence. I can think of two camping trips that I was on with Magic, where each of the people on these trips, especially this one men's camping trip we went on, I'll just talk about that one. Each of us brought our gifts and assisted each other at different times in either facing some things that we were afraid of, or feeling our feelings on a deeper level, or simply expanding into presence and being willing to embrace other possibilities different than the ones that we maybe entered the camping trip with. Um, if it had been a workshop, I would have valued that weekend with Magic and Adam and David and Marie and Marcus. Marcus was the other one. I would have valued that at least $1,500 weekend experience. And all we did was go out to have a camping trip, and it turned into each of us providing our gifts. I got to experience some of Magic's magic, and I will say that he is one of the most talented individuals that I've sat with, who's able to listen deeply, tune in, and see what's occurring in the field. He's with a person or a couple, and meet them in a way that is beautifully simple and yet requires a lot of it in my life. When I put people like Magic, there's a lot of work that has gone into getting to where he is and what he's able to do. And another gift that this man has that I watched that weekend is his ability to sense the land and the power and possibility of including the energy that is present in the land into the experience that we're having. And so when he says he doesn't use medicine, not a substance, and yet his ability to connect with Mother Nature, Mama Gaia, this island Maui, is exceptional. And we're going to talk about this lead, which is the path of being, and I capitalized being with quotes around it, what is. And our special guest Magic will be joining us as we discuss how what is occurring in our present time field, whether it be spiritual, mental, emotional, or physical. And that's what I was saying a little bit earlier, is there are times in my life where I've gotten comfortable and not sought out expansive experiences, whether it be with a coach or whether it be a workshop or whether it be simply a challenging hike or a snorkel. And that's a dangerous place for me to be. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Magic and we will begin.
Well, thanks for all of that, Timothy. I wanted to clarify one thing. You know, I said there something like that. I don't use medicine, but as I think you just clarified, you know, there is a medicine that I use. I use sacred sites. I use the power of land, power of nature, which is catalyzing, amplifying, and accelerates our awakening and our transformation. And then I also use, you know, the transmission of the frequency of unconditional love and multidimensional reality. And that's also a medicine. I'm literally transmitting that to people, and it does go into their psyche, go into their body, and it evokes things. It evokes anything that's living in separation, any wounds, any traumas, any value conflicts, any belief systems, doubts, fears, all of that comes up. It rises to the surface to be loved, to be embraced, to be unified with you, which then unifies you with yourself and then ultimately with all that is. So I'm glad you said that, and to be able to clarify that. And then I wanted to comment on what you were speaking about, because that camping trip was beautiful. I really appreciated how everybody was open to both give their gifts, and there was a lot of gifted people there. Timothy is one of the more gifted beings that I've come across, in his ability to track what's going on and provide a more expansive space and a more conscious space with which to interact and dive into. And everybody there was being that, and also open and receptive to whatever they might have to learn and whatever they might be able to step into in their shadows and to transform. And one of the real pitfalls of being on a spiritual journey that I've noticed, as you were alluding to, is that I've seen a lot of people along the way that reach a certain level of whatever you want to call it, enlightenment, awakening, transformational success. And they reach a point where they go, and I think what happens when they get there is that they look around and they see that they've gone a long way and that they've accomplished a lot and they're feeling good. And then, especially if they're a teacher, they start to feel like if they were to expose their vulnerabilities, then somehow they're not as good as they say they are. Somehow that makes them weaker. Somehow that's exposing that they're not so great. And it's very subtle that they stop sharing those vulnerabilities and they stop going into those vulnerabilities, and it's a slippery slope. And it leads to what I call a know-it-all identity, where the person sort of feels like they kind of have it all figured out and they know everything, and it closes down their openness to reflections and transformation. And then they just start building this spiritual egoic identity as the teacher or the one who knows or the one who's awakened, and they stay stuck there. And I would say for 99.9% of us humans, awakening is not something that you accomplish. It is a verb. It is an action. It is something that is ongoing. It's not a place that we arrive. So I think this is a great topic. And I'll just add one more thing, which is living on Maui, which is a place where spirituality is very important to a lot of people here. What we're talking about is pretty rampant. There are a lot of people who have done a lot of work and they've kind of leveled off because they have a certain level of comfort and a certain level of identity that's attached to where they are, and they are not deep diving anymore. They're surface diving. They'll go to a workshop here and there, but they won't go deep into one thing. It's like, oh, taste here and the taste there, so I don't have to get too vulnerable. And so there's a way that we can get stuck. And so it's a great topic, and I'm constantly endeavoring myself to continue to unearth the parts of me that are anything but peace and love, and to bring peace and love to those parts.
One of the ways that I appreciate communal living. Right now, I have a beautiful, blessed situation where it's pretty easeful with my housemates. And I have a lovely brother named Adam, who's an accomplished mindfulness practitioner and teacher, and very skilled in that area. And our personalities differ down here on the ground floor. On the spiritual plane, I'd say he's my teacher, and on the details plane, the ground masculine, we're going camping, we got to have the cooking stove and the water and the tent and make sure we don't forget anything. That's kind of my expertise. I'm really good at the details. So we meet in these opposite areas, and as we call each other in and point out the different parts of our personalities that are showing up, because if I get frustrated with Adam's sometimes inability to pay attention to the details, I can become very grumpy and rude, and even call him out in ways that are humiliating. And that's not who I am when I'm in my awakened state. Those are aspects of myself that I have let, I'm going to use an analogy here. If we imagine ourselves as a castle, and we imagine the throne room not as a place where there's a king and a queen throne, but there's the throne of consciousness at the highest peak in this castle. And in my castle, I strive to keep consciousness in the throne of awareness and allow all my parts to come home, drawbridges open, there is no military defense, there is peace in the kingdom. When things are like that, my life is in a state of surrender to the divine, or if we don't want to get really spiritual, in a state to what is, an acceptance, an awareness of what is, and then action from that place, rather than my old Timothy would decide he wanted something and then figure out a path to get it and then force his way down that path until he achieved it or failed. And if he failed, he was wise enough, I guess, to pick himself up and try again a different tact. I've now reached a point where I would rather allow my consciousness to sit in the throne of awareness and pay attention to all the different aspects of myself as they show up, and show up they will, especially in relationship, which is what Adam and my relationship offers. The beauty is that we call each other in, meaning we don't blame each other, we don't yell at each other, we don't fight. It gets tense sometimes, but we stay in and we know we love each other. And in that process, I see aspects of myself come back to the castle, and Adam is seeing the same. And we both move into this verb that Magick so beautifully described, which is the process, the continual process of awakening and having the multidimensional aspects of ourselves come into the umbrella or the castle.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Well, that's actually where I wanted to go next, was into like a little more practical, like actual, I was going to give an example kind of like, because the way I look at the world is, if I'm ever feeling tension, charge, irritation, frustration, upset in any way with the world, the likelihood is that it's triggering something in me. There's a wound, there's an unresolved loss, something from my history, from my childhood, that hasn't been fully metabolized and released, and it's getting activated. So as I walk through the world, anything that hits me in that way, I don't look out there like, oh, it's coming from out there. I look at myself. However, sometimes that takes a little time. Sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes I am in blame at first, and it takes me a bit to dial that in. So I live also with a housemate and somebody else on the property. And a lot of times we've had 3 people in the house at times. And I noticed that when I was first living here, that I live mostly downstairs, but I have to come upstairs to get to the kitchen and use the kitchen. And I noticed that when I would come upstairs during my busy day and I'm in the middle of my own kind of groove, my housemate would often start to engage me in conversation. And he wasn't doing anything wrong. He's just engaging me in conversation, but it was triggering me. And I started having these stories like, doesn't this guy respect my space? Doesn't he respect, that I have, that there's boundaries here, that I might not want to talk right now, and all these stories and things going on in my head. And then I decided to take responsibility. And the way that I did that was to sit down and be with those feelings in my body. Like, what does it feel like to be upset and to be blaming him and to have charge? And can I drop into those somatically, find where are they in my body, and start to sit with them and be present with them so I can discover what's really going on. And as I did that, what I discovered was, one, I'm the one that didn't go to him and say, this is what I need. How's he supposed to know what I need? He's just having a conversation, right? So it's up to me to actually request a boundary and then to enforce the boundary. And then secondly, as I sat with it even deeper, I discovered that it comes from a childhood wound. When I was a kid and I would walk through the house to go to the kitchen or anywhere else, my parents would always engage me in conversation. There were no boundaries. There were no distinctions, no borders. I didn't have my own space. My father would come in my room unannounced. He would knock on the door. When I asked him to knock, he would knock and open. He would pick up letters on my desk and start reading them, open my drawers absentmindedly, because he just didn't have any distinction between him and anything else. It wasn't his fault. It's how he was raised. He was doing the best he could. But it was a wound for me, and it was getting activated. So I went in and I attended to that wound. And I brought unconditional love to the feelings that occurred to me back then from what was happening with not having boundaries and my father violating those and not honoring them. And as I brought the unconditional love to those earlier experiences, they started to heal. First, they got bigger because the unconditional love gives them permission to exist. It doesn't push them out of the way and replace it with the feelings of unconditional love, which would be a spiritual bypass. This unconditional love allows reality to be more of what it is. And so I was feeling the pain of my parents doing that. And in so feeling it and holding it and loving it, it gave it a chance to heal and release. That took some time. Didn't happen in a second, probably happened in an hour, hour and a half. It finally released. And then, and only then, I went to my housemate and I said, this is what's happening for me. When you talk to me when I'm coming through the house, I'm really focused. I'm in another world. I don't have time to talk. And so I'd like to make a request that during work hours, Monday through Friday, that you don't engage with me when I come through the house. And that if you do, other times you kind of check in and say, hey, are you available for a conversation? And then I shared with him the wound that, hey, it's not about you. It's a wound that's getting activated. It's my issue. And I'm requesting your assistance with it. And what was so beautiful is when I shared that with him, which could have been like, you're doing something wrong. Stop doing that to me. And it could have been tension. What happened instead is he said to me, oh, well, it's hitting a wound for me. Because when I was a kid, my parents didn't pay attention to me. I didn't get enough love and attention. And there's a wounded child inside of me that desperately wants love and attention. And that's why I'm always talking to you. Now our compassion for each other's children is up and surfaced, and we're just in love with each other and trying to support and care for each other's child. And so what could have been something that drove us apart brought us together. And that's how I find that the world around me is a constant mirror to reflect to me where I'm unresolved, always. And I don't think that will ever leave me. And if someone is not experiencing that, I would suggest that's an invitation to take a look inside and see what's going on. If you're thinking it's everybody else's fault, or the problem is outside of you, or if only XYZ would change, then I would fill in the blank, be happy, whatever it is, those are all indicators to take a look inside and see where you might not be taking responsibility.
Yes, beautiful. Such a great example. Thank you, Magic.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind is the process of the actual way of living that you're describing brings life into a magical existence. And I don't mean magical in the sense of tricks. I mean an actual experience of life being a sacred mirror, as he talked about, as it being a magical journey that we get to be on, one miracle after another. And most of us aren't seeing the miracles because, as Magic said, we get caught up in the external world and we either see it as proof that we're worthless in some capacity or another, or proof that everybody's out to get us. There's some kind of negative thinking that we are incubating and allowing and existing with, rather than looking deeper, as he so beautifully described, to our family, to possibly other events in our life that have shaped the way we look at the world and aren't allowing us to experience the world as it really is, which is magical. It's one miracle after another. The other thing that he said that touched something in me is he's describing a process that I know he's learned from in his way. I won't say what that way is. He's learned it, but it's been through practice of some kind. The process that I have learned to take people through is sometimes called internal family systems work. I learned it as parts theory. It's the same kind of information just a little bit different. Scott Katamas with Love Coach Academy. I'll stream his banner right now because
Oh, I love Scott.
yeah, we'll put that up, but I want this one. Where did it go?
While you're putting
Oh,
that up,
right.
I want to say I love Scott
Right.
Katamas. What a beautiful man with beautiful practices of unconditional love and nonviolent communication. Yeah, he's a dear friend.
And he teaches a process that is similar to what Magic described of taking the time when we're triggered to ask for a pause. Magic didn't just launch at his housemate, to go feel what we're feeling, to look deeper at what needs aren't being met. And then Magic also talked about going even deeper into parts of himself. Scott would call it sub-personalities. I like parts theory, some internal family system. Magic's just really naming it, right? Naming it to taming it. Tame it, as Heidi talks about, to integrate it. I wanted to just say, if you don't know what we're talking about, then and it interests you, then reach out to one of us and set up an inquiry call and allow us, or if you want to work with Scott Katamas, because just hearing his name or you know who he is, then reach out to Love Coach Academy. Because I don't think it's not something I could have done all by myself. I had a lot of people with me encouraging me to do the feeling work, to look at the unmet needs, and then more importantly, to speak with and hold and offer unconditional love from my observer, from my highest self, all the way down to the parts that were showing up. And most of the time that requires another step, which is to recognize what it is they need and then where that need came from. And do I need a boundary, as Magic talked about? Or sometimes am I just simply reassigning their mission? Because sometimes I've developed habitual patterns that are unconscious or semi-conscious that aren't serving me anymore, but they served me really well when Jeff used to hit me at school, right? I developed some really good things that helped me avoid getting hit by Jeff, dealing with Jeff. But when I apply those to just your everyday person, they're not serving me at all. And so as I've come down into when that gets triggered, that hasn't in a long time, but let's say that boundary around getting touched inappropriately is triggered, I'm able to feel the feelings, look at the need for respect and personal space, recognize that Jeff played a part in me developing some of my harsh attitude to people when I'm triggered that way. And then I can come back to discernment and recognize, oh, this actual individual is not Jeff and is just approaching me in kind of a rambunctious way. And there's really nothing wrong with it. I actually want to meet with him. I don't even need to have a conversation. I've just reassigned that part of me and said, it's okay. This is play. And we're going to play with this person. So there's lots of ways to work with this. But again, if this language isn't resonating with you and you have no experience with it, I would suggest reaching out to one of us and getting a little coaching around it. And I would say that not because there's anything wrong with you. I would say that because my personal belief, might say knowing, my experience is that we are here to become more and more present, to be more aware, more conscious, and live a life full of bliss and magic. And that doesn't mean we bypass anything. It means that anger, sadness, all of those feelings that we sometimes don't want to feel are also miracles and are also part of magic. Walk them.
Yeah, I had a long session with a client today, helping her to see that most of our suffering actually comes from our attempt to avoid these so-called negative feelings and to accumulate and acquire the positive feelings. And that's actually a surefire recipe for suffering, because it's impossible to avoid the feelings that are negative and to only have positive feelings. And in our attempt to not experience the bad ones, we are going to not metabolize our emotions properly. We're not going to process emotions. We're not going to heal things that occur, release our loss. Those things are going to get stuck and they're going to accumulate in our body because our emotions need to be felt in order to move and resolve and heal and empty. So if we're like, nope, not going to feel that because it's fear, well, then we're going to end up having that get stored in the body. Depression. Most people think depression comes because somebody, or they're afraid if they go into their sadness, they'll get lost there and never come out. They'll be depressed. When it's actually the opposite. Depression happens because people don't feel their sadness, and therefore it doesn't empty and it starts to accumulate until it gets so big that it's unavoidable and it consumes us. Phobias don't come because we went into our fears. Phobias come because we avoid our fears and they get stuck in the body and then they build up and accumulate and come out sideways in different strange ways. When we can reach a place where we welcome all of our emotions equally and we're not playing favorites anymore, we achieve true peace because now we don't need reality to change to be happy. We are at peace with the world the way it is. That does not come typically easily. And most people who hear that can't even imagine what that would be like because they've only experienced the world through the lens of judging their emotions as good or bad, which therefore influences and affects how they experience them. So suffering, my definition of suffering is the resistance to what is. You know, it's your reaction to what's occurring inside of you and outside of you that's creating the suffering, not the thing itself. So, you know, Timothy mentioned that where he and I are in terms of the work that we do did not come overnight. There's a lot of practice. You know, for me, 25 plus years of practice of studying parts work and Silva and NLP and just about every other methodology that was out there, and becoming a teacher of some of them, that enabled me to be able to embody and do this. So it's not like you can go to a workshop and then you're done. This is a lifelong practice. I actually have my own work that I've developed. It's called the Oneness Method, and it incorporates some of parts work and all kinds of different experiences that I've had with different bodies of work along the way. And I found that this is the one method that when I apply it to anything, that's why it's called the Oneness Method, partly, apply it to anything and it brings resolution. It also is a spiritual practice in addition to an emotional and psychological resolution practice because it takes us into oneness. When you are one with your emotions, when you are one with your feelings and your thoughts and everything that's occurring inside of you, that is oneness. Most people, when they speak about oneness, what they're really talking about is halfness. They want the good stuff, the light, the love, the laughter, the play. They don't want the sadness, the pain, the fear, the anger that's also part of life. If you want to be on a spiritual path to experience oneness, then it's essential and necessary to embrace the light and the dark, the good and the bad. Those are all just judgments of the mind anyway. They don't exist. But once we embrace them and unconditionally love them, it heals. And then we return to a state of oneness and we enter into oneness. Oneness is an inside job. You become one with everything you discover inside of you that you feel divisive with and you don't want to be with, then you will experience the mystical, magical, miraculous, infinite space of what you truly are, which is unified, one with all that is.
Beautiful. I'll give you a real life talk, real life situation of my own where what Magick is talking about was something I re-metabolized at a greater level than what I already had. And that was a tumor in my throat, which by the time they diagnosed it had gone from 3 centimeters. By the time they started treating it, had gone from 3 centimeters all the way down my esophagus, across my tongue. And when I heard the C word, I thought, I'm going to die. And it was a 20, 4% chance. And I also thought, if I do survive, I'm going to have lifelong ramifications. I won't be able to function the same way that there was a lot of fear coming, a lot of predictions. And for 2 weeks, I was in a lot of suffering. I was Facebook video lives that I shared with people. Unfortunately, I had a very good friend of mine, Bertram, call me at the deepest, darkest moment and say, Timothy, you're greater than this. Go inward, surrender to all of it. Don't avoid any of it. Look at every aspect, emotional, belief systems, guilt, shame, every part of it. Look at all of it, because it's not just some tumor that manifested out of nowhere. So now we may differ, right? You differ with, please listen to the value of it. Some people would say, no, cancer happened. Well, my experience as I went deeper into it, what Magick is saying is true. There was a lot of shame and guilt, a lot of pain in this tumor. And every week when they did my chemo, they took a picture of it. And every Friday they'd show me the picture and show me how it was reducing. So the first week it was pretty much the same. The second week it had reduced a good amount. The third week, after I had taken Bertram's advice and started meditating as I knew how to do deeply, and leaving my personality and my structure behind, going into actual empty, into possibility, I had a spiritual experience. I heard a voice, and the voice said, you have created this moment in your life so that you can opt out. But you don't have to. You can go back if you want. And I literally felt that I was not Timothy, but my soul frequency was at a doorway between this reality and something else, something greater than this reality. And I said, well, why would I go back? They said, well, you haven't fulfilled your purpose. I just looked at my life as really painful, and I didn't really want to go through all the emotions and all the things that were coming up. I didn't want to deal with the situations that I had created. Well, tell me, what's my purpose? Maybe it'll be something interesting. Maybe I'll save the whales, uh, uh, rescue elephants. You know, a rare rhinosaur just went extinct. It's official. It's gone. Work on that. And the voice just said, no, it's a mystery. And if you choose to go back, you'll get to watch it unfold. So I chose to come back. Long story short, went in Friday. Tumor was gone. And the doctor looked at me and said, you know, you're in the top 2 percentile of recovery. I still want you to finish the chemo and radiation. You're in the top 2 percentile of recovery, meaning what had happened was very rare. Assign whatever belief you want to that. I'm just giving you facts. And the pain got worse and worse and worse and worse. It didn't get better. But my attitude, as Magick was saying, my ability to just embrace whatever arose, whatever situation happened, not being able to swallow food anymore, having to feed myself 5 times a day liquid through a tube, none of it fazed me. My happiness, I'm going to cry, my joy was constant. And I felt all the pain and all the sadness and noticed all the fears. And they helped me release the shame and the guilt and everything that I was carrying. And now I am living a life where I really live with what is. And I enjoy simply receiving and watching life unfold moment by moment by moment. That doesn't mean I don't brush my teeth. That doesn't mean I don't invest money in the stock market. It doesn't mean I don't think about my retirement. But I'm not living from a place of avoiding what is, storing feelings in the body, not taking responsibility for my mistakes. I share that extreme example because imagine how easy it could be with your car got stolen. And you can see how some people might immediately go to, oh my God, my car is stolen, and adrenaline running, storing emotions negatively in the body, as opposed to take a pause, take a breath. What's happening? How am I feeling? What needs do I have? How do I meet those needs? Take action. Awareness, acceptance, act. Back to you, Magic.
Well, I'm very moved by that story. Like, I've heard it before, but it's incredible that you were able to make that breakthrough and to realize everything is a gift. Every moment is a miracle, you know, that we're alive and sitting here right now. And we tend to be so disconnected from that and caught up in the moment of, you know, do I feel good or do I feel bad, and trying to manage that, versus if you knew this was your last moment on earth, you wouldn't care whether you felt bad or not. Most likely you would just want to embrace it fully and experience what it is to be alive, right? We tend to drop into this illusion of permanence, like that we're going to be here in the next moment, and that is total bullshit. None of us has any idea whether we're going to be here the next moment. I have a friend who was perfectly healthy. He was super wealthy, drove a Rolls Royce, had this happy family, kids, you know, retired, 40 years old, fly fishing in Montana, aneurysm. 2 minutes later, dead. No warning. You know, we tend to have this kind of like illusion going on in our head that it's not going to happen to us, or we're going to know, or it's not true. And so what if you could live with that in every moment? You know, I have a friend that works with the dead, not the dead and dying, the death and dying. And I remember one time he was talking about, you know, pretty conscious people when they're on their deathbed, when every breath could be the last breath. Time changes. You know, time is relative. Time is a construct that we've made up with our minds. If you take thought and the mind out of it, there's no such thing as time. We live in a timeless space. But we have different kinds of constructed time that we do, you know, like I won't get into all that, but let me just skip to the point here, which is that he said that when people are dying and they're pretty conscious, they move into what he calls dying time. And dying time is when you know that each breath might be your last breath. And so it matters. Every breath matters. What if you stepped into that space right now? How would your life be different? What might happen differently? As Timothy said, it's not that you might not plan the future or invest in the stock market, but a lot drops away when we do that. And we're just present and alive. I feel like one of the secrets to awakening is something that I heard Timothy describing, which is, can we be fully embodied as a human, experiencing the now, which is limited and impermanent, and I will die, and I was born, and I am finite, and what happens in this moment matters. Can I fully embrace that? Embracing my emotions, embracing whatever's occurring fully and completely, while at the exact same time, seemingly paradoxically, can I also be fully embodying my divinity, or one could say the universe, or all that is, or my energy body, the awareness, the part of me that wasn't born and that doesn't die. That's the same in Timothy. It is in me as it is in you. There is no difference. We are all the same. We are all animated by the same undifferentiated, unmanifest, and manifest potential. The suchness of all that is, where nothing matters. Doesn't matter if I live or die. Doesn't matter if I hurt or I don't, because I'm infinite. Can I be in that space and in the space where it matters and feeling everything at the same time, which is what I heard you describing you were in. And it's an exquisite place to be. But it takes for most of us work on both of those paths to embody our divinity, to realize through meditation and disciplined practice who we and what we truly are, as well as to embody our humanity, which is the day-to-day places where we get hurt and somebody judges us and we judge somebody else and we feel rejected and we have our doubts and our insecurities, and to feel all of that as well. It's a beautiful place that brings true peace, which is what most people really want. But they're doing the opposite to try to achieve it. They're chasing after the material world, chasing after objects and shiny things and relationships and cars and money and places and all these different things, which are really the booby prize. You know, they're like the fake prize, to think that that stuff is really going to give you what you need. Because of course, if you've ever gotten any of those things, you've probably noticed that the satisfaction and the fulfillment and the contentment from them does not last forever. It's temporary, as all things in material reality are. So it can't bring you peace. It's not possible. The only place we can actually find the peace that we're truly seeking is realizing our true nature, dropping into the mystical experience that occurs when we're one with ourselves. And then we realize that we are infinite. That's where the peace is. And then the emotions don't matter anymore. It's like, oh, I can feel angry. I can even feel hatred. I can feel love. I can feel fear, doubt. They come and go. They're just temporary. So it's the other side of the temporary nature of reality, the other side of the coin. It's like everything here is temporary, so I don't actually need to be concerned about it as a problem. I do need to feel it and be with it, but it's not a problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, they don't go away, my experience, but we don't project onto the emotions good or bad.
Right.
As Magic said earlier, we simply go, oh, there's an apple. Oh, there's an orange. And we eat it. We don't deny it. We digest it. And it moves through us. And then and that keeps us, as Cahill Gibran would say, in the state of balance, where we're not swinging into joy and hatred, and all these emotions are kind of navigating our life. As we feel them, it brings us into greater discernment, awareness. Then part of that is acceptance. And then we can choose to buy the Rolls Royce or not, depending on whether we can afford it or not. And we know that it might bring us some pleasure for a while, maybe even for a long time, but that our peace of mind is not determined by whether or not we get the Rolls Royce. Our value as a human being is not determined by whether or not we have a big watch on our wrist or a fancy house. And in America, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, there's been too much value placed on how it looks rather than the fact that every human being, every soul, every animal, every visible and invisible being has intrinsic value just for being. So whether your hair's gray or you're 22 doesn't make one less worthy or less valuable than the other. We all have access to what Magic's talking about, which is a greater inner peace and an ability to be present and enjoy this magical mystery ride called life. I wanted to ask Magic a question, and that was one thing we haven't touched on. So we've touched on avoiding what's happening emotionally. We've talked about belief systems that get in the way and kind of drag us off of ourselves in present moment or cause us to shrink or blame. We've talked about the process of feeling, needs, boundaries, acceptance. I'm noticing in many people, and in myself, I'll be humble, that times there are longings inside of me that arise that move me out of presence and take me away from, as you were saying at the beginning of the call, take me into this dynamic where, oh, if I don't have, and it's usually then what I'm seeing right now is this relationship, this soulmate, this person to complete me or meet me in every way possible, then my life is not abundant, full, pleasurable, fill in the blank. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of already talking about it. You know, the Buddhists call it the hungry ghost. You know, the hungry ghost is the part of us that feels like something outside of ourself is going to give us fulfillment, is going to bring us happiness, is going to bring us joy. There was a 16th or 17th century philosopher named, I think his name was Ortega Gasset, who coined this word otheration. And I'll probably butcher his philosophy, but my interpretation of it is that otheration is when we have this perception that anything other than our own internal reality is going to bring us lasting happiness. That's called otheration. So the other person, the soulmate, is going to bring us what we need. And that is a trap, because that other person is never going to bring you 100% peace and love and happiness all the time. In fact, it's very likely that the partner that you draw in is actually going to reflect to you the places that you haven't actually healed, and your shadows, and the places where you've inherited the wounds of your father and your mother and genealogical systems and even past lives. And so that stuff's going to come out even more with your partner, and there's going to be challenge and there's going to be friction. And so that's a place that is not, the peace and the happiness is not lasting. It's impermanent. Like everything else on this material plane, you are distracted from where your attention needs to be when it's on that. The only place you can find unabided, lasting peace and joy is by going inside and realizing your true nature and healing everything that is separation, so that you come into unity with all that is. That's the place. The silence that abides inside of you is the place that peace is. The person that you're with is going to be challenging. They're going to die someday. They could break up with you. Like, it's all temporary. So to me, that's just another form of avoidance, which is, you know, part of the topic that you wanted to talk about here today, Timothy. There's like all these ways that we just avoid our discomfort, our places where we don't like ourselves and we don't like what's arising, that's coming out of our history. We avoid it through spiritual practice. Some people avoid it through meditation. You know, they go sit in a cave and meditate all the time, and really just avoiding the parts of their humanity that are painful and uncomfortable. You know, everything can be in the light or in the dark, but there's lots and lots of ways that people tend to avoid themselves. And there's a lot of spiritualized ways to do it. And then there's sort of the traditional ways of watching TV and going for the right woman or the right man, or the right meal, or the car, or going to the movies, or listening to music, or whatever it might be, which all are not right or wrong. It's just like right use, right place, right time. How is it the truth to be doing those things, or are they avoidance? Anytime you can have that sentence that says, I will be happy when, and there's something that needs to happen out here for that to occur, you know that you're not on the track to true peace and true lasting happiness. You know, I went to a workshop once, and the guy, he said, everybody who's willing to participate fully in this workshop, raise your hand. I'm like, okay. Everybody who's willing to maintain confidentiality of what occurs here, raise your hand. Okay. Everybody who's willing to be in joy throughout this entire workshop, raise your hand. And I was like, well, I don't know that I can agree with that, because I'm going to be what I am. I'm going to be angry, or whatever it comes up, I'm going to be that. And he said, oh, you haven't been out around us before. You don't know my definition of joy. So what's that? He said, my definition of joy is being with what is fully and completely. Ah, yes, I can agree to intend that. I don't know if I can agree to maintain and sustain that all the time, because that's a tall order, but I can intend it, and I can go for that. And it is my experience that when I'm fully, if I'm afraid, if I actually am fully in my fear, there's actually a power there, because I'm fully connected with my own body, with myself, with all my parts, with my psychic abilities, with my divinity. When I'm in my body, I'm fully online. So even when I'm feeling my full sadness or my full fear, there's a joy there because I am self-connected and I am present and I am alive right here, right now.
I love this, two things. One is you're giving a really beautiful tool. I can say the word awareness, but what does it mean? And Magic gave a beautiful way of approaching awareness, which is if I'm doing something to distract myself from the present moment, most likely, not always, but most likely I am avoiding feeling, being with something that is occurring internally. That doesn't mean we can't go enjoy playing tennis, especially if it brings us into the present moment, especially if we're noticing our frustrations and our angers and our defeat and our victories, and we're enjoying that whole process and we're aware of it as much as we can be. Wow, what a great tool tennis has become. But if we're playing tennis like clockwork every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, whether we want to or not, because that's what we do, not so sure. And if worse, if we're playing tennis every chance we can to avoid our wife or our children or our job or our stress, it may be that tennis has actually become something that's not helpful, because the way to get out of the stress is to go inward and as we can. And then the second thing is, so just noticing when we're using something to distract ourselves from something uncomfortable. The second thing is in conjunction, and that Magic talked about, is that when we are embracing our fear, and I would also add when we're examining or being with our fantasies fully, not pursuing them, being with them, fear or fantasy, and really diving as deeply into them as we can to get to the root of whatever it is they're wanting to show us, that's when we're actually, as he defined joy earlier, practicing being in joy, because we're completely and utterly embracing everything that's with us. Now, I don't mean that when there's a grizzly bear running at you, that you go so far into your fear amygdala response. It's not what I'm talking about, that you start running. Because when you face a grizzly bear, you don't want to run, you don't want to climb a tree, you want to raise your hands and yell right back at the bear and let it know you're the predator, you're the dominant, and the bear will typically, I've seen this happen in life, turn and run. Bear doesn't want to attack something that it thinks can hurt, and bears think humans are dangerous. So that type of fear, yeah, I don't want you to surrender to it and start running and get hurt. But the fear of stand-up comedy, the fear of having a conversation with loved one, fear of feeling a feeling, the fear of a belief that you're worthless, facing those type of fears on the other side as we do the work is liberation, greater and greater awareness, greater presence.
Absolutely. I know we're probably close to out of time, but I did just want to tap one thing that you mentioned that sometimes people don't realize is a common way of avoidance, and that is fantasy. Most of the time, if not all the time, when people are fantasizing, that is an avoidance of what is. They don't want to feel something. They don't want to be present with reality. And it's quite a disguise. People
Simple,
think,
a real quick, simple example.
yeah,
If you were like me in elementary school, it was so boring, you were doing this. Timothy, yeah? And then she'd say something and then I'd answer the question. And I was avoiding the boredom of that classroom, hours and hours at the desk, by fantasizing about other things, right? And I learned to do that. The problem wasn't that. The problem was later when difficult situations arise, often I would go into the fantasy because I'd learned to use that as a way to escape difficult situations early on.
Yeah, or another
So,
example is when people have had a breakup or a divorce and they continue to fantasize about possibly getting back together, right? That's a way to avoid the grief. It's a way to
yeah.
avoid the really intense feelings of loss And so you fantasize, maybe it could work out, even fantasizing about how it could have been different, or I could have done something different, or they could have done something different. All of that just keeps us from feeling what's real and true. And
Yeah,
it's
some people call that the bargaining phase of grief, when we've
yeah,
lost
right.
someone who's still alive. We're bargaining. When if we really come to terms with our sadness and our feeling over the loss and really owning it, we are able to come back to awareness, which is, I have to accept that is over.
Yeah. We could talk for a whole hour about all the different ways that people escape with fantasy that are not healthy and useful. I just wanted to throw it quickly out there because you mentioned it, and it's
What
true.
about, what are you doing next week this time?
Oh, yeah. We talked about getting together again and doing a part 2. And I am almost sure I can do that. I just have one private session with a client that starts at 4 Hawaii time that I just have to ask him if he can start about half an hour later. I don't think it'll be a problem. So I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, or there's the possibility of you do what you need to do and maybe you leave this conversation a little early, and we
Yeah.
have done them sometimes where they're only 50 minutes. So
Yeah.
all
That's great.
right. Well,
And then we're on for sure.
we look forward to, most likely, and again, neither Magic or I might not be here tomorrow. You might not be here tomorrow. So with full surrender and acceptance into the mystery of the impermanence of life, we plan on being here with you next week, and we'll pick up where we left off with fantasy. And I'm sure we're also going to uncover other ways that people avoid being with what is being man's greatest gift, because it helps us come into presence, consciousness, awareness. And we're not talking about bypassing anything.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's great
All
being here.
right.
Thank you for
I'm
coming.
just, go ahead and stay on, Magic. Don't leave. I'm just going to close out the live.
Okay.
And now I'm going to do it.